Alright, I'm Coach Nefarious, and I'll be taking a look at your VOD, and I will also be taking a look at another VOD of my own choosing. So, strap in, because I'm gonna be roasting a little bit. Obviously, honestly, it's coaching. Like, I have to talk about not just micro errors, not just macro errors, but also just general approach to the game, what I think about that, what I think you could do, right, and just give my honest, true opinions about how I think you could improve as a player. So let's get right into it. Anyway, so this first situation, there we go. This is a very important one. This is where you start out with a flank, and you pick out the backliner here, which is a debatable choice. And as you move along here, now you get an Olaf over here. The rest of the team is on the left side, right? And this is where you have to make a crucial choice on how to play this out. Now, Sivir at the moment isn't very menacing. You're 2 levels up. You have challenging smite for 20% damage reduction if you want to use that while you kite down the Sivir and join your team, right? Put Kayn in the middle of 5 players, so that even if you were to die, you kill Sivir for sure, and you kill Kayn for sure, right? So the main concern here is not whether you live or not. I do think you would live, but more importantly is that you just secure the kills, and you know, you will always unconditionally win the fight in that scenario. Okay, so big observation here is to notice that your entire team's over here. Then you got like one little threat over here, and you got this big ass dude over here coming in, right? So, which means that if you want to converge with 5 players onto the remaining people, it's quite easy to imagine they can just meet up in the center with you, right? So you can all converge in the middle over here. That is the fundamental idea behind this play that I want to show you. That's one of the most important. Obviously, I try to analyze situations that have a general point behind it. This is a good example of that. So here you move away from the Sivir, but the Sivir really is only a very temporary threat. Like, you're just gonna have to tank through a little bit of damage to allow your team to properly collapse. Now they have to sort of split up. They get to run you down 2v1 right now. Kayn gets to 1v1 you for quite a while, right? And the team is just trying to play catch up here, right? So essentially your team, this 4-man is over here. They're running like this. You're running away from them, right? And then Kayn has a little bit of time to turn on you and just absolutely tear you a new one, right? And to get here, you need to just sit through a little bit of damage from that Sivir. You overcome that immediate sense of, oh god, I'm gonna get auto attack like 3 or 4 times, right? Just trade autos and move. Okay, that's one that's so important. That's why I want to spend a few minutes at that situation. Other than that, this game wasn't particularly interesting. There's some flawed gameplay here at certain points. You kite the camps really well. That's not a problem. Now over here, this gank is debatable. You shouldn't be able to win it if they just, you know, play it out correctly. Here you see Sylas first turning on the Olaf without coordinating that with Kayn. Olaf is running up, which completely telegraphs that you're here, which Sylas doesn't pick up on. Then Kayn first turns on the Olaf, but wastes his Q, which means he now has no effective abilities. And then Sylas also turns around to you instead of the Olaf, and they just, essentially, they wasted all of their abilities, split focus in the worst possible way, which sets up this gank. Now, I do have a certain amount of a philosophy of do things until failure, right? Not gonna tell you like, oh, this wouldn't work in Challenger, so don't do it. That's not always a valid approach, of course. However, this was a little unnecessary, because if they just keep walking the way they are, then you're not gonna catch up to them, and you're wasting a huge amount of time. And this as well. Let's look at this, for example. Here, I remember that you mentioned this. It was a very interesting moment where you were on Krugs, and you analyzed this as a counter gank. But look at this, you are 15 seconds removed, at least, from this mid lane, and you're just finishing up this camp as well, which is fine. Which means that this gank is completely over well before you get there. This gank is already over, so there's no counter gank, right? And honestly, Kane can do whatever the hell he wants, considering he doesn't have any significant camps up other than Krugs. He should be moving to his Krugs here. That's the only option he should be considering at all. Right? Is it worth it to move into the jungle here instead of, for example, move into bot lane? Debatably, yeah, you could make an argument. I think perhaps based on the game timer, it might be better to go base, right? I can't see your inventory and stuff like that. To go base or to go into river. But your goal should definitely not be to hunt down the Kayn, because again, you're assuming the worst of the worst situation. Which just makes for essentially a coin toss. Like, you'll have a game where you just have 3 heads, and it gives you, let's say, now you're 3-0, you're doing really well. And then another game, it turns tails, and let's say you die to the Sylas and Kayn, right? If they hold on to their abilities and turn immediately. Or you just don't get any kills and you're losing resources, right? So that is a very, very high-risk strategy you're playing. Even though if you play very, very low risk, you can very consistently get ahead in silver, gold, platinum, bronze. At some point, you do need to become, obviously, you need to start removing some of the margins and work on your evaluations. But right now, if you play low risk, you're absolutely fine. So just keep that in mind. Essentially, the lower the elo, the more margins of error you should have if you play strategically sound, right? So if you feel like you're in very tight situations, or you rely completely on someone to make a huge blunder by stepping into river, even though he's Krugs up and there's nothing to gain in river right now, the bot lane's under turret, you just completely random error, like, that is going to drastically reduce in value as you climb. So I'm just, that is something, you can do it until failure if you want to, but you can also be one step ahead of the events. Again, right, as long as you have a good feedback loop based on your mistakes, right, you eventually, let's say someone reacts appropriately, goes the other way, and you waste a bunch of time, that's when you're like, okay, I guess I will no longer back there, right? So that's absolutely fine. Other than that, I don't have too much interesting things to say. You picked out a VOD. Remember what I said, right? You need to be picking out a VOD that shows flawed gameplay, and try and analyze the level at which you do different aspects of the game, and then come up with potential causes for that being at its current level, and how you could resolve that. Part of it may come down to practice, right? Just like, okay, I haven't played that much yet, I can just practice a little bit more and it will get better naturally. I don't have to split hairs and think about it too much yet. That might be a valid response to a certain pattern of mistakes. But you also might be like, well, honestly, I'm autopiloting a lot, or like I wasn't aware of the lane state over there while this was happening. During a play, I become very tunneled on where this person is, and I'm not looking around me at my teammate. Let's say, for example, maybe in that Kayn play, right? Maybe you're like, looking back on that, I didn't really think about where my team was and how accessible they are. Like, is it worth it? I didn't consider the option. Maybe instead you considered that, you saw that, and you were like, rather, I just didn't feel like tanking the Sivir. So I completely negated the option based on a very short-term loss of a bit of health, right? And didn't really look at the longer term, like what happens when these two people are sandwiched in between 5 people, right? So those are all potential, again, I can't answer that for you, but those are things you should be looking at. What is the underlying cause of that? Because they each have their own solutions. I can help with that as well, right? Like, I know how to deal with it. That is just the first part. That is this VOD review. I would recommend in the future, first of all, I would pick a VOD where you don't play well. It's not a shame. This is a coaching thing, right? You're aiming to pick out a bad replay so that you can have more good games in the future, right? So you don't get that validation in the VOD review. You get that validation when you play better in your games. And the second part is to focus more on patterns of mistakes and potential solutions to those patterns of mistakes, or potential causes and then solutions to that, right? Making a little bit more of a structure around it rather than just, this is what I did and that's it. Alright, see you in part 2. Alright, so this is going to be part 2 of the VOD review, in which I picked out a game of Riven versus Darius that you played, where I was curious to see what happened, because this is a good example of a skill matchup that is very, very winnable. So let's say if I play this matchup in this elo, I am very confident. That Vayne game you played at a good level, right? That was pretty smooth sailing. There's some moments where I'm like, you should have done this, you should have done that, where you qualitatively make some worse decisions than, let's say, a diamond player would. However, right now you're not even, like, 1 tier up is not diamond, 1 tier up is gold, and I think the mistakes you made would be perfectly in line with what I expecting to see in gold. That was absolutely fine. However, this game is different. This game, I feel like if you, let's say if you put a high gold Riven in this game, there are a couple of things you can do that they already do, which you currently don't. And we're just going to take a look at what it is and how you can implement some things, right? Because obviously I'm not just looking at mistakes, I'm looking at what is reasonable to improve on in the short term and what would be a more long-term project, right? You got to have some context behind your mistakes. So here, first you maybe disconnected, maybe you were dissatisfied with things being said in chat, maybe, I don't know, right? I don't care, right? That can happen. Happens to me as well sometimes. If it's a disconnect or something else, or I don't care, right? That doesn't matter. That's not the point. That's not going to be the point of this. Like, oh, you did this level 1. That's silly. Why did you do that? That's not going to help in the long term at all. So let's just take a look at it. So in this one, let me take a look at my notes. That is 2:49 game time. 2:44. Oh, whoops. Skadoosh. Skedaddle. All right. Let's take a look. This was a good example where you hit level 2 here. This is a good moment where you get your Q up and he's under turret. He respects you here, right? He doesn't go for the proc, but then he returns. And you have no minions to CS right now. So this is a moment where if he's very close to the turret, you can try and trade with him. Because you have the ignite, right? So he can't really just... If it is a very risky situation, because if a Darius has the potential to only tank 1 turret shot to do an auto WQ combo, then you're going to lose drastically, and you're going to get set up for a dive if that happens twice. So this is a moment where you can punish him, especially when he lands the last hit. You got to remember, League is a game of constantly changing resources, and you want to punish a lack of resources on the enemy all the time and react to your resources, etc., etc. It just spikes up and down with every auto attack and every ability that you use. And that is the most fundamental aspect of all of laning, is responding to cooldowns. So right now he used an auto attack, which means that he's down 1 ability, right? He only has, let's say, QWE, and he would have auto attack, he has flash, ghost, so he doesn't have this, and he doesn't have this right now, and this is really big of a deal, right? So you have an auto attack on him, and that is absolutely huge. It's hard to overestimate how big of a deal that is when he's standing on the turret like that. So now he can't go for some sort of auto WQ combo because he doesn't have an auto. So it would be a horrible trade for him if he tanks a turret shot and your combo. Again, this is what laning is all about. It's like boxing, you know. Someone removes their guard for 1 second, and that 1 second you punch someone in the goddamn face, right? You don't have more time than that. Like, the higher you go, the shorter those time windows get. It can be half a second or a quarter second, and you will have to use those half second, quarter second time windows more and more as you climb. So this is a good example of that. Now you have a certain setup here, right? For a certain, you have a certain trading pattern. Like, engaging on him under turret is a certain set pattern that you can opt for, and it has a certain condition to work or fail, right? And I just described that when he's very close to the turret, you can do it, or when he drops the auto on the turret, you can do it for sure, right? If he's a little bit further away, where he just tank 1 turret shot, it becomes very rough, or when he can pull you out of a last hit, those are things that change the setup a little bit of that pattern, right? So for example, right here, you need to focus on that minion. And here you need to focus on CS all the time. So this was something you can primarily do when there's no last hits and when he's walking up to turret, and especially if he auto attacks, right? Now all those things have gone, right? So you're losing a CS here. He's not under turret anymore, and you have to use a gap closer to get even remotely close to him, right? Any amount of gap closing you use to get someone is something you can't use defensively, right? Which means you're already draining more resources just to select the fact that you're going to trade, right? If you were to just be able to walk up an auto queue, then you would still have the E to get out, right? And shield his damage as well. So here you can see that this trade is very, very negative. And if you wanted to take a trade, then you essentially would want to do it when he's under turret, right? So there's two aspects to this. The first one is just analyzing the different trading patterns and how they work. The second one is what I call internal consistency. Let's say you're wrong and you think you can't trade him under turret. I think that would be like that would be acceptable, right? But then what that means is that if it's even more difficult, just objectively more difficult to trade, for example, because Darius is standing outside of turret range, then it should incentivize you even more not to trade. Shouldn't even be thinking about it. There's CS dying under your turret as well. So your radar, essentially what I would call it, just like in chess, right? The radar is what they call how you select your options to even think about it. I wouldn't even be considering for a moment to trade with Darius outside of turret range when he's a level up and I've got minions dying on the turret, and if I trade I take minion damage. 3 caster minions, 1 hit, equivalent of these 3 caster minions is 1 auto attack of Darius. So that is a lot of damage that you're gathering from just a little short trade like this, like auto attack, and then you get the entire trade as well. So that needs to be one big priority. I know if you want to play jungle or lane, it doesn't really matter. This is going to be a recurring theme, like being able to register as well when you can go in on someone is a universal concept. Obviously, whether you need the last hit or not is going to be specific to the lane. But the abilities and whether someone auto attacks and when you can go for something, that is going to be unconditional and is easiest to learn in a lane where you just have less margins of error. Now this is another one. This is why I like this kind of lane, because it shows a lot of micro and fundamentals of micro. So looking at this setup, you are slow pushing into him, right? And he hits level 4 here because he's just like, he's got vastly more experience. You are using, again, you're using an ability just to get closer to him. I can tell you a little secret. If you walk up here and he's like, he respects you and walks away from the wave, you get wave control, which is what you want, right? Chances are he's not going to walk away even if you save your E. So you can just save all those gap closers for when you actually trade, instead of using it just to say, I want to trade with you right now and I'm going to gap close in order to get to you. Right, so if ever, this is especially true for Darius. Darius as well would never want to walk up and just apprehend you unless he's already so far ahead that he just wants to poke you down a little bit and you have no chance of trading positively anyway. But otherwise this happens. Also make sure, this is the one point I want to make. There's a second point to this which is absolutely crucial as well. These are the lane fundamentals. These are the things that on which the road to diamond is built. This is a moment where, let's say, if you approach from this angle, then in the short term, if you want to maximize your distance away from Darius, you need to go the exact same route that you went in. Now, that might land you into a bit of terrain here eventually. So, in general, this might not be a problem in this particular situation, but in general, you would strive to remain between Darius and your turret, so that you can walk towards your turret and away from Darius with the same move command, right? So that you don't have to make an awkward choice of moving a little bit into an obstacle to remain moving away from Darius. But that is not always relevant. Probably wouldn't have been relevant in this situation. But that's a very important fundamental to pick up on. Alright, so this is going to be part 3, in which I round up the analysis. I'm not going to talk about many new plays. And what I'm also going to do is talk about causes, solutions, the general kind of coaching stuff that I cover. Alright, so let's start by re-looking at the lane for 1 second and talking about a topic that I haven't mentioned. So, one thing I've noticed is the CSing prep. For example, here you know these two. This is something, the better you get at planning ahead how you're going to kill CS, the more time you have to think about the trades you're going to do. And the more you know about trading and how and when, the more you know about, the more time you have remaining, I should say, to think about the jungle states, right? From which angles they can be coming. And the easier it is to focus on a weakness. Let's say you find out you're weak at one particular thing, you want to focus on it. Well, that's a lot easier if you have really good fundamentals in particular aspects of the game, so that you don't suddenly fall behind 30 CS if you focus on trading or focus on watching the minimap, whatever it may be, right? So looking at this, you already know that this minion might get damaged from these incoming minions, but the second melee is not. So you never ever want to auto that one. And this is a very crucial mistake, because what this will do is, if you want to get these caster minions, for example, you would need to do that in during a moment where Darius is walking up to the turret and can't trade because he's standing under your turret, right? But you're forced to auto this again and prep it some more because you already auto attacked it once. Which means that now you're delayed on being able to trade with Darius if you wanted to, being able to prep these caster minions if you want to get them, right? You might not be able to get these once these minions die, because he might be able to threaten you with an apprehend, right? So you want to do as much of this when he blunders by stepping up to turret range, right? That's not really what he wants to do, because it gives you time to walk up to those casters right now. And then when he backs off, you would be backing off as well, because he's getting into relative safety, right? Which is away from your turret. So this way you miss this CS, you miss this CS, and I talked about the trading here in this part 2. But yeah, the combination of being able to plan ahead CS, for example, this one, I know this one is going to be dying next, right? So you want to be constantly looking at different points with your eyes. There's APM with your mouse, right? Then there's APM with your keyboard, which is usually not an issue for anyone. That's not a problem, right? And then there's APM with your eyes as well. Just looking at different parts, looking at this incoming minion wave is not a cannon. You need to look at that. Look at these casters. Where are they going? Where's turret? What's the turret doing? What's his health bar? Look at Darius. Right. Look at the minimap. Constantly want to be scattering all over the place, glancing at everything, and not remaining fixated on one thing for too long. Of course, I can't see where your eyes are looking, but I'm just saying how it should be, and not like what I can see, right? I'm just stating this in general. So you would have wanted to pick up this CS, and then you know, because there's a minion targeted on this one, that you can get this CS next, and then you know you can get either this one or this one, whether they're in range, right? So you got all that mapped out, which gives you, again, that gives you a little pocket of time to look at the minimap one more time, and look if you can see if these guys are flashing, if you know if you're facing an alliance with flash stun or not, right? So that gives you an edge, not only in terms of the income of the minions, but it gives you a huge edge in terms of being able to focus on other things, because you've already planned out the most minute actions in lane. That's why I spend a lot of time analyzing fundamentals and stuff, because if I mention a macro concept, let's say I mention like, let's say I mention some sort of macro concept, like Master Yi players usually want to camp the solo lanes because bot lanes often have a lot of control, right? So they get kind of down, so they would theoretically want to camp top lane, especially in this high impact matchup against the Juggernaut that has no escapes. Master Yi excels at running down juggernauts, right? That's what he does best. So he should be setting up ganks real soon. For example, right now when Darius is perma-shoving and he has no proper ward setup. He never deep warded. We see that he never goes out of lane. This is all macro that I'm talking about right now, right? That I haven't mentioned before, right? If I talk about these concepts, and you then look at where Master Yi is, what he should be doing, whether you should be asking for a gank, obviously you're doing that while you're CSing and while you're trading, and while you're thinking about where the enemy jungler is, right? So you can see how, if I talk about that and tell you how to communicate and how to do things, your ability to execute that is going to depend on how fluent you are with the micro of the game, right? That's why they say macro follows from micro, because the better you are at the little parts of planning and execution, like hitting minions and planning that ahead of time, yeah, the better you are at thinking about the more abstract concepts, because you have more time for that during the game. Alright, that's it. That's like, obviously a little bit of repetition. I want to really emphasize these points. Hope you don't mind. Very glad that you sent in a VOD review. I think that was very fair. I think the game you showed, you played very well. I've said what I thought about that. I don't think it's a crime. I didn't say you need to send me VOD XYZ or else it's bad. And it's not bad. It shows me stuff as well. But I did also pick out this VOD because I feel like I couldn't really talk about too many fundamentals of jungling or laning in the VOD that you showed. And that's alright. So I just want to explain that for a second. Hope you enjoyed this one. Hope you can take the criticism, and hopefully some of the points I made about some of the lane fundamentals here make sense. You can use a lot of these when you're jungling. You can use, for example, if you notice, let's say for example Darius pulls someone in as a jungler, that is often your key to ganking, because a lot of ganks which you will do with Kayn or Master Yi which you play would fail if Darius has Ghost and Apprehend up. Right, so again, that little bit of a sense of engaged timers and stuff will carry over. And you just have to be a certain level of laner to be able to jungle as well. It's just the micro is so interconnected. So, hope you enjoyed that, and I'll see you sometime soon.